Yo guys, what's up? Today I'm gonna talk about the unannounced Japanese air attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. But in order to understand this Jap retaliation on USA, we need to go back to the end of the 19th century. From July 25th, 1894 until April 17, 1895, a Sino-Japanese war was fought predominantly for influence over Korea. Japan kept on winning for 6 months, and a 3-month period of peace led up to a defeat for the Qing Empire. Korea was submitted to the Japanese atmosphere after only 1,132 soldiers had died out of 240,000. But a response came from USA that came up with an open door policy for China, in order to keep China open to trade with all countries on an equal basis. But basically it was a cover-up to keep exploiting the Chinese markets. Japan continued to push China out of Taiwan and occupied Korea, and started a war with the Russian Empire in 1904, also for Korea and Manchuria. From February 8, 1904 until September 5, 1905, a hard battle was fought, ending up in another Japanese victory. Around 25,000 Jap soldiers died. The Russians lost nearly double that amount. In 1905, the Republic of Korea became an official protectorate of Japan and would remain under Jap rule until 1945, after the government had fled to Chinese exile in 1910. On December 25, 1926, Hirohito became the new emperor of Japan, but he lived a distant life away from the public. He was present for all important meetings with his ministers, but not all orders requested the emperor's approval, leading people like Hideki Tojo into ultimate power. Tojo had been promoted to chief of the Kanto army in 1937, but saw a drastic measure from USA in 1940. Japan had driven the French troops out of Indochina, and as a result, USA waged a trade sanction on Japan for scrap iron and plane fuel. The Japs were unable to hold down Indochina. In February 1941, Tojo was sworn in as Minister of War and also became Prime Minister a few months later. In July, USA fortified its defenses in the Philippines with B-17 bombers. With Roosevelt on China's side, it was time for Japanese payback on December 7, 1941. With the small divisions of remaining Jap airplanes, USA had to be knocked out of the Pacific Ocean. Several hours before the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan had sent out a warning message. They would be carrying out a mission in which no hostile actions would be tolerated. From that moment on, things went very fast on December 7, 1941. Reports started to come in from Jap attacks over Singapore, Malaya, Guam, and Siam, now known as Thailand. An attack on a Philippine bases was confirmed as well, all part of Plan Z that was commanded by Admiral Yamamoto. The next step of Plan Z was to use all 6 of the Japanese aircraft carriers for an air bombardment of Pearl Harbor, an American naval base in Hawaii, to keep the 2 Japanese battleships, the Musashi and the Yamato, out of battle. The Yamato was the biggest battleship in history. A total of 441 airplanes carried out the attack on the morning of December 7th, destroying 5 of the 8 US battleships and 188 of the 390 airplanes. Also, 3 destroyers and cruisers were annihilated, and a total of 2,402 Americans died, plus 1 non-American. Still, this number is nothing compared to the 9,400 German refugees that died when the MV Wilhelm Gustloff was sunk by a Soviet submarine on January 30th, 1945. This is still the biggest sea grave in history, but USA was outraged, both the public as the president. Roosevelt didn't wait any longer. USA declared war on Japan on December 8, 1941. Hitler declared war on USA and came up with a German-Japanese pact, a war that would take place in the Atlantic Ocean from 1942 until D-Day. With 5 German U-boat bases in northwest France, American supply ships had been struggling with torpedo attacks for quite a while. The Pacific War between USA and Japan would begin in 1942 with Australia as an ally for USA in the battle for New Guinea and the Philippines. under the command of General Douglas MacArthur, a veteran of World War I. Japan and Tojo had severely wounded USA, but had dragged them into a David versus Goliath battle. The samurai spirit of the Japanese people and soldiers would have to prevail against the American bombers. With a horrific guerrilla-styled warfare and lots of mass executions, acts of torture and crimes against humanity, the plan was to spread a message of fear to all possible enemies. Not only Chinese civilians were submitted to torture, also Koreans and captured Soviets. We will discuss that later. Next time we're going into the Holocaust by introducing the very lifeblood of the German army, the Reichsbahn. See you on the next one, guys. Peace.